I don't know how true it is. I hope it's not true. But Takeoff was murdered in a dice game in Houston, where we're going. So that eliminates all y'all leaving that hotel, because it ain't happening until I give you further notice. There's no way a man that has made it in life, has reached his pinnacle of the rap game, well known all over the world, is still playing dice in the inner city with a whosoever will that's already jealous, envious of you. Sooner or later, we got to start changing our addresses, guys. That's an analogy to saying, I know we this, but we ain't that. We got to leave that behind that we once did. And that's what you guys are. Now you guys are Jackson State royalty. You ain't no, man. You're not whoever you were a year ago. You're not even who you're going to be a year from now, which is a blessing. But you can't continuously do the things you've always done and expect to get the results. It's going to have to be a change.
After Takeoff of Migos was murdered earlier this week, Deion Sanders, they're talking to his football team about moving on. Many folks in the black community have this feeling. We've seen it recently as more and more of these artists, well-known people end up shot and killed in violent nature. It seems to be increasing. So a conversation appears to be beginning to be had more publicly yet again. But what Deion Sanders' point there was you guys have reached a different echelon in your careers. You're at a university now. You have potential to go pro. You have all these opportunities in any other realms of your life. Let's stay away from those things that maybe stereotypically people believe we used to do and that we're supposed to be doing. In this particular case, he's talking about how dice game apparently was reportedly happening when the argument broke out that eventually led to Takeoff's death. I want to open up as a discussion here though from each aspect of this, because there's more people talking about it. And I think it's an interesting conversation to have. But Deion Sanders, Jackson here, his first approach is one that we've heard many times. This isn't a brand new conversation. For folks who maybe don't want to talk about this before, there's been plenty of times when the black community is like, listen, some of our well-known, most talented, influential people are finding themselves in these positions. What's wrong with how we're approaching this? Deion's apparently is, you gotta leave all that stuff behind. The type of stuff maybe that they expected us to be doing before. It's time to move on. I'm not sure what you think about that approach. Many people do have problems with that thought. What are yours?
Well, I mean, there's always something to be said about being mindful of the steps you take as you advance in life, for certain. But the bigger issue is that there's too many damn guns in the country, and that it's too easy for people to get their hands on them at large because, Takeoff had his life taken. A lot of hip hop artists have their lives taken. But this is a matter of daily routine in this country. There's mass shootings all the time, and in poor neighborhoods where there aren't access to jobs, good schools, or just general hope for a positive future. Those are the bigger issues that society needs to address, which often lead people to acts of gun violence, whether it be some argument. There's obviously a case by case. But the bigger problem is that people have too easy access to guns. Over 20 young men I grew up with in St. Louis were shot and killed. I'm only 30 years old. You know what I'm saying? Some, a decent amount of those people, granted, were gang members and involved in gang activity, but a lot of them weren't. They just were wrong place, wrong time. You know what I mean? So,
and many times that is thing is happening, and that's where I'm glad there's 2 points here you brought up. As far as like the folks you knew in the past who got caught up in the violence, and then also the next step of what you then do afterwards, or then what it is we can do as far as the gun situation. Because Jamil Hill, formerly of ESPN, host out there now, I think she still writes with The Atlantic. TMZ caught up with her in the airport as she was jumping off, and they asked her about this as well, and she did bring up the gun issue in a specific way. The folks that are influential in this industry, maybe it'll put some pressure on the lawmakers and legislators that could do something about it. Let's listen to what she said.
Unfortunately, our community, the black community, has been sieged by violence for so long that we're used to just navigating around it, figuring out a way that we can live with it. And so I'm hesitant to say that we need to stop going places, we need to stop doing this, we need to stop wearing that. Because you have flashy jewelry because you worked hard to buy it, right? Yeah. So I think there does need to be a community conversation about what we can do, how we can mobilize and politically force our leaders to address this very pervasive issue. I would like to see a lot of rappers and label owners and industry leaders have a collective conversation with the people in charge whose job it is to get violence and guns off the street. They can force this conversation in a way that hasn't been had. Yeah, there are some community issues that we need to face, but that's not the only solution.
I like her multi-layered approach because there needs to continuously be this fight as far as regulating and limiting access to these types of weapons and guns in the streets. Because yes, we'll hear politicians talk about what's happening, Donald Trump in particular. Look what's happening in Chicago. Look what's happening in New York. Look what's happening in DC. You know, they like to say, look what's happening without saying what it is they want to do about it. So an approach differently is there. But so the curious part about this is, and I'm wondering what you think of it, because I'm gonna let Jamil Hill say one more part here, because there is a bit of a societal factor, at least within the black community many times, specifically with well-known artists. They end up in different cities. And I never really knew if this was true. But Jamil Hill pointed out one other part within the community that might help with these types of things. Because I think collectively, everyone is tired. Here's one more piece from Jamil.
The craziest thing to me is hearing about how when rappers go to certain cities that they have to check in with certain people there. That sounds like some slave shit. Like it really does, like a restriction of movements. Like that's how we used to be controlled during slavery. It should never be a situation where black people go to other black communities and feel like they're at risk and not safe. And I understand that you want to be respectful to the neighborhoods you enter. But also understand, as black people, whether they check in with you or not, they should feel safe. I think now it's time for hip hop to make a similar stand, like they did in the early 90s and the late 80s, and say enough is enough. I thought when I was in college, when Biggie and Pac were killed, and I thought that would be the last time we would ever see rappers of certainly that status being killed. And now it's happening so frequently, you can't even keep up. Yeah. There needs to be some kind of big group public conversation about what is happening and why so many of our young black men who are talented and extraordinary have to lose their lives for going out to eat, for just simply existing.
There's so many different situations where this type of thing happens. Look, P&B Rock, just like last month, I believe, out eating at a Roscoe's. It wasn't like the way Deion started with a dice game or something where you're back in the community, or then you're talking to folks who you have to check in, which again, Jackson here, I still didn't know that was a reality. But I liked her point about there's a problem when black folks can't feel comfortable and safe around other black folks sometimes.
I mean,
I don't know how often that really is the case. This is what I'm saying. I feel like reality.
My thing is, it's like that's cool, but like having a big conversation doesn't matter. Like it's that's too liberal. Like it's cool, it's nice, but like the bigger issue is that simple fixes need to be made. Communities need to be better. There need to be better jobs. There need to be better, a stronger social safety net. There needs to be a balancing of the tax system. The prison industrial complex needs to be taken down. Things like that. That's what's going to make a difference. Like I'm too familiar with this type of reality, and I'm sure she is as well. And I'm not, I'm not coming down on her for it, but like I don't know what she talking about. What happened in the 80s and 90s? You know what I'm saying? Like this is just issues of poverty. This isn't this isn't necessarily unique to the black community. Like you see this all over the world, wherever people ain't got no money, you know what I'm saying? And come from a culture of that, gang cultures. Gangs, like one gang could have an 80-year history. Like, so this isn't like, let's come together and talk. Like that's not gonna do anything. Like
that's something I feel like is maybe, I don't want to say marketing, but like on the surface to show that there's some level of conversation happening, that we're sick of this. By the way, that narrative that black folks aren't sick of this is never been the reality of the situation. So I get that part, and yeah, maybe other things outside of just the gun regulation type of things, but also just all those things that change communities, and that's what we have to force people that are elected to do. And that's part of the fight that we're having. It's what makes everyone so damn tired, because we separate what causes these things. Because then it leads to that normal racism of that's just black folks. It's not.